I always noticed there was this string of hippie holidays that happen in April. Starting with April 19th, you have Bicycle Day, then there's 420, and then April 22nd is Earth Day. But I always noticed this string of days because my birthday actually fills the gap between 420 and Earth Day. So I always used to joke around with my friends like this is my hippie holiday week. And so then I thought, what if Psychedelic Week was a thing? So I'm proposing that we do make this a thing, and here's my outline of the idea. So every day for 7 days, we'll have a theme, kind of like Spirit Week, but psychedelic stuff. On each of these 7 days, we'll be acknowledging the different chakras in the 7 chakra system. So we'll also be doing self-care and things that are related to that chakra and kind of just talking about the aspects of being related to those different levels. So here's my proposed themes for each day. Bicycle Day, 420, Music Day, Earth Day, Harm Reduction Day, Visionary Art Day, and Cosmic Perspective Day. For now, I'll stick to these main themes and kind of talk about the history of these holidays and like how it's celebrated now. And I'll also be talking about the chakras since I've been a little steeped in that stuff for about 10 years. This is a new idea. It's also open to suggestions. So if anyone has any ideas or wants to help modify and create this, I'm totally open to that. I would also like to help advocate for psychedelics in a nuanced and responsible way. I don't think that these are a panacea or a cure-all, but they should definitely be able to be given to people who would benefit from them. And I think a lot of people still don't take psychedelics because of the stigma and the severe penalty of getting caught with the Schedule 1 substance. But we can't be reckless either, so I want to make sure we dedicate a day to harm reduction and safety, as well as psychedelic therapy. So yeah, just to recap, the general idea is every day I'm going to be making a video about these different themes, talking about the history and the current day celebration of each day, and I'll also be discussing the different chakras and how to kind of open them up and different kinds of activities that can help you center yourself in these different chakras. So that's the outline of the plan, and you'll be seeing more videos very soon, hopefully every day if I can keep up the pace. See you soon. Peace. Hey y'all, welcome to Psychedelic Week. This is the first day of my list of hippie holidays, starting with Bicycle Day. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the history of Bicycle Day and how it's celebrated now. We're also going to be discussing each chakra every day of this week. So today we'll be focusing on the root chakra. And we'll do different forms of self-care relating to that chakra. So you'll see a little bit more of what I mean later in the video. So Bicycle Day originally starts with the very first LSD trip, which was by Albert Hofmann. He was the chemist who stumbled upon LSD looking for medicines that could help with blood dilation and heart health, but he accidentally discovered the now famous LSD. And on April 16th, 1943, he accidentally ingested a little bit. I think it was on a Friday, and he noticed something was going on. Maybe he tripped a little bit. He might have absorbed some through his fingers. That's what's suspected. And it was on the following Monday, April 19th, 1943, Albert Hofmann ingested LSD for the very first time intentionally. What he thought was a tiny dose at the time was 250 micrograms. And as psychonauts know now, that is not a light dose to be messed around with, especially if you're not expecting it. So as his trip was starting to come on and he realized that it was going to be a really intense experience, he knew he needed to go home from the lab, so he rode his bike home, and he was tripping at this point. So that's why Bicycle Day is associated with the bicycle. So the very first bicycle day celebrating this event in psychedelic history was in 1985. It was a college professor named Thomas Roberts who held a very small celebration in his home in honor of this event. He originally did want to celebrate the 16th since that is technically the first acid trip in history, but because he wanted to have a party and the 19th fell on a weekend, that was what he went with. So I think that was the right choice in the end too. And the bicycle thing has become pretty iconic. Over the years, more and more people heard about Bicycle Day and it gained steam around the world. And Bicycle Day is often celebrated as its own version of 420, 4-LSD. But that's not the only way to celebrate. Some people simply acknowledge LSD as the historical game changer that it was. You can also celebrate by listening to psychedelic music, looking at psychedelic art, or watching movies or documentaries. There are a lot of different ways to celebrate it. In more recent years, it's become a lot more organized. You'll have like museums doing exhibits dedicated to Bicycle Day. And I know every year Alex Gray does a whole like video segment from Cosm talking about Bicycle Day. So I will put the link for that in the description. In honor of Albert Hofmann, I want to show you a short clip of him speaking about the mystical experience.
LSD experience has something to do to the view as children. If the world of LSD is close to that of children. And every human being has a possibility of mystical experience. It's a visionary experience of the world, of our life, and so is nothing artificial. It is really inborn. It is in the subconscious of every human being, I believe. Because we have been children, everybody, and we have had this worldview. And in addition to the vision of a child, we have the consciousness more. And this can be complementary. We have the consciousness and we have this visionary experience of the world that gives a deeper, even a deeper experience of life. I think it is very difficult to describe, to put in words the experience. I think it's impossible. Huxley said we should create a new language for the mystical experience.
There's a story about the very first time that the Beatles ever smoked weed in 1964, and Paul McCartney described it as a mystical experience. Check this out.
I thought I got the meaning to life that night. And I went around trying to find our roadie. Mal, get a pencil and a paper. I've got it. And Mal, because we're a bit out of it, he couldn't find a pencil and paper anywhere. But eventually, in the end of the evening, he found it, and I wrote down my message for the universe, you know. I said, now keep that in your pocket. And Mal did. The next morning, he said, hey, Paul, he said, do you want to see that? I said, what? He said, that bit of paper. Oh, yeah. And I'd written, there are 7 levels.
Seems pretty vague, right? But considering that I've had an experience of this serpentine, spiraling energy rising up different levels as it goes up my spine, this rings a bell. And there also seems to be something with cannabis that's bringing this out. I think what Paul McCartney is talking about has to do with the 7 chakras, and a lot of good things come in 7 levels. The basis of the major scale in music is 7 notes, and this is the basis for millions of songs. And there's also a very similar system in the Indian classical music. Whenever Isaac Newton was doing his pioneering research in the science of light, he originally had 5 colors, but then he added orange and indigo to make it 7 because it matched the notes of the major scale. Often because of this, each chakra gets associated with its own color and with its own note in the major scale. I don't take the association of specific notes and colors too seriously. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, I see it as a symbolic map of something that's really going on in the subtle body. Also like a tool to help you meditate on these centers. The chakra we're going to talk about today on day 1 of Psychedelic Week is the root chakra. But I actually want to talk a little bit about chakras, and just so you kind of have an idea of where I'm coming from with all of this. The way I look at chakras are like succeeding levels of biological existence. So the root chakra being our first one, I associate that with the level of our being that is cells. It's that extremely primal level of our existence that is directly connected to the material plane of existence. It's kind of like when you look at the structure of the brain, you can see how it's succeeding layers that have built on the previous ones as evolution goes on. Like our brainstem is what is left over from when we were reptiles. It's the reptilian mind that's at the bottom of our brainstem, and as we evolved, we grew more layers to our brain that were more sophisticated. So I see the chakras in the same way. It's like the base levels of our existence, and then as we evolved into more complex organisms, we reached these higher and higher chakras. So the root being the level of the blood and the cells, and the second chakra being the level of mammals, and then the third chakra being individual, so on and so forth. Tim Leary and Robert Anton Wilson were the people who kind of put forward this idea of circuits instead of calling chakras, which comes from the Hindu system, thousands of years old. It's kind of like a modern way of putting it is considering them to be circuits of our existence. And before we really get into it, I want to read something to you. It's a quote from somebody who is a Sanskrit scholar and their thoughts on how we interpret chakras in the West and in modern day times. Because the truth is, there isn't that much concrete information about the chakras. A lot of people like myself have experience of them. There's also so many different chakra systems out there, but in my eyes, the 7-level system seems to be the one that I've verified for myself. But I want to read you this quote because I thought it was a pretty balanced way to look at the chakras. So they said, "This might be the most important point. English sources tend to present the chakra system as an existential fact, using descriptive language like the Muladhara chakra is at the base of the spine and it is red, and so on. But in most of the original Sanskrit sources, we're not being taught about the way things are. We're being given a specific yogic practice. We are to visualize a subtle object made of colored light, shaped like a lotus or a spinning wheel, at a specific point in the body, and then activate mantric syllables in it for specific purposes. The texts are prescriptive. They tell you what you ought to do to achieve a specific goal by mystical means. When the literal Sanskrit reads, in its elliptical fashion, 4-petaled red lotus at the base of the body, we're supposed to understand the yogi ought to visualize a 4-petaled lotus. So that's the thing, is this isn't meant to be taken so literal. It's more of a map, and it's like a tool for your meditation. It's like a way to concentrate on these specific centers in the body. But I also think that there is something to these specific symbols and colors that they use. Also, what I'm saying is I don't want to speak with confidence using an oversimplified version of the chakras, which I think is why a lot of this stuff sounds so silly to people who are somewhat skeptical about this. So what I will be sharing with you is based on a lot of my personal experience though. So the root chakra is based at the bottom of your spine and it is in the area of the perineum. And so, yeah, when you're meditating on this chakra, you imagine kind of like a point of light or a sphere of energy in this area of the perineum. This chakra is associated with your primal instincts of security, safety, and being present and feeling like you belong where you are. It has to do with our connection to the earth, and it's in the realm of the physical plane. There's a presence that comes with rootedness and feeling like you're connected to the earth. In Kundalini, there's said to be 2 currents, one masculine and one feminine. And Kundalini energy as a whole is the weaving together of these two energies. And the masculine energy is rising from the root, going up your spine, and the feminine energy is coming in from the cosmos and going down through your crown and down. And it's a combination of these two that make up Kundalini as a whole. You could also think of this as positive and negative currents, or like yin and yang. When this chakra is unbalanced or out of whack, you feel anxious, insecure, and unsafe a lot of the time, and you just feel kind of ungrounded. I mean, that's a pretty literal way of saying it, but that's also how it feels. Like you're living in survival mode all the time, always in fight or flight. When you start to do Kundalini-based meditations, you start to become more aware of these centers and when they feel like they might be imbalanced. It's not all the time, but sometimes I can feel a physical sensation whenever I feel like one of these chakra centers is out of balance. Even if you don't feel the chakras or energy or anything like that, you can still recognize the aspects of consciousness that these are related to. Like if you feel ungrounded, you don't have to feel an energy ball inside of you to know that you feel ungrounded. So there's always a way to monitor them. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I feel help whenever you're feeling unrooted. And I'm very familiar with this. This is probably the chakra that I have struggled with the most, because after my experience on LSD of cosmic consciousness and Kundalini, I actually felt like I was a total space cadet and like totally unrooted. I just was blasted so deep into space that it took me a really long time to actually settle down back into the piece of clay of earth that I really am. There's a multitude of different ways to balance the chakra, but I'm going to share with you the ones that I feel really help me, and I believe that it's a combination of doing all of these things that really helps. So the first is sound meditation. I often meditate to this guy on YouTube called Temple Sounds. He does Tibetan singing bowls while also doing a guided meditation. The meditation is focusing on the physical area of the chakra, but it's also talking about these different aspects of being that are related to it. So he'll be telling you to focus on that area, but he'll also be kind of giving you words of affirmation and saying like you feel secure, you feel like you belong, and just kind of reinforcing the aspect of consciousness that are related to all of that. I'm going to put a link in the description for you guys to check that out, and I'll be doing it with you today. The other thing that has a rooting effect is drumming. There's something primal and grounding about drumming. It has to like connect us to our ancestors or connect us to something super primal and human. One time I was stoned and drumming, and I saw this chamber. It was like a 4-section grid, and I felt like the beat and stuff that I was playing was modulating this grid, and it was also red. So it felt like I was looking inside of some kind of spiritual heart. Something about the grid was also very grounding, and it actually resonates with when you see the Hindu depiction of the root chakra. They show it as a lotus with 4 red petals. And so I think this is a good example of how the map that you see of the chakras isn't a literal thing, but these 4 petals could represent this kind of grid-like energy that I was seeing. Like, I think that there's something really there and that these symbols are pointing to them. Some people say you should wear red to balance the chakra. So I'm not totally sure if I'm sold on this idea, even though I'm wearing red right now, but I think it has more to do with like the intention and the ritual behind it. It's kind of like another tool to help you focus on that particular aspect. Another great way to ground is to literally touch the earth. Take off your socks and go stand on the ground and just feel yourself connecting to the earth. I like to imagine a light going from the top of my head down through my feet and then going into the earth as deep as possible, and imagining that you have some kind of roots that are actually going into the earth and they're made of light. And that also these roots are kind of rising from the earth up into you and providing you with stability. And then just meditating on this feeling and also thinking about how the earth provides everything that we need to survive. It has all the air we need, all the water, all the food, all the other things that we need for life are right here on earth. So just kind of rest in that feeling of being nurtured by the earth. Also, when your feet are touching the ground, really enjoy that and like dig into it and focus on the sensation of the ground touching your feet. Another thing that I didn't learn until later on is that you can get grounded by being around other people, being around your close friends and family especially, and especially if those people have a very grounded energy about them. Someone with grounded energy can be like an oasis for somebody who's feeling unrooted. People in the past have told me that I give off like an earthy, grounded energy, and I thought this was pretty ironic because at that time I felt like I was totally uprooted and like floating through space, like a total space cadet. But I think maybe I was compensating for that, which the whole cosmic consciousness was cool, but it came at a cost if you're ungrounded. I feel way more grounded now though, for sure. The other way to ground yourself is through yoga exercises and breath exercises that specifically deal with this chakra. There's a YouTube video I know about in particular, and I'm gonna put the link to that in the description. And I'm gonna be doing that with you guys today and doing all of these grounding things that I'm talking about, because that's what we're doing today for Psychedelic Week. Well, that's about it for this video. Happy Bicycle Day, and I hope y'all feel grounded. You deserve to feel secure, safe, and present to enjoy what lies ahead. These Psychedelic Week videos are going on its own playlist of the same name, and so I'll be posting videos every day this week there. So I'll see you on the next video. Hope you enjoyed this. Happy 420, y'all. This is a great idea for a holiday dedicated to one of humanity's most beloved plants, cannabis. Over the years, it's had dozens and dozens of nicknames: grass, pot, herb, ganja, weed, and nowadays you hear like loud, gas, sativa, so many different names. Cannabis is the scientific name, and it sounds quite sophisticated when you say it, but I prefer the term jazz cigarette. 420 is a legendary code word for weed, and now it's celebrated every April 20th. Stoners all around the world get really, really high. So we're gonna get a little bit into the history of 420 and how it's celebrated today. And later in the video, we're gonna be talking about the sacral chakra. Before we get into this, I think I'm gonna need to get into the right headspace, if you know what I'm saying. So, 1 second. And we're back. The history of 420 begins in 1971, California. A group of students who were also athletes would meet up after school because they had heard rumors that there was a crop of weed growing in the forest somewhere. So they would meet after school at 4:20 p.m. and go and search for it. And of course, they would get high themselves before they went on their search. 420 became the code word so they could talk about it without their teachers or parents knowing what they were doing, which is kind of the origin behind a lot of nicknames for substances. The members of the group had connections to the band The Grateful Dead, so people started to use the term 420 in that community, and that's where it really caught on. The High Times magazine did a report about the history of 420 in the 90s, and that's when everything started to take off on a global scale. Now I gotta figure out how to talk when I'm getting cotton mouth. I know what the solution is. More. I'm committed to quality, so that's why I'm willing to make this sacrifice for you guys and get really high. Nowadays, 420 is celebrated every year, April 20th, or if you're a real stoner, every day at 4:20 p.m. The way that 420 is usually celebrated around the world is in the form of weed festivals. I've never been to one, but I've seen videos of huge crowds all smoking a lot of weed, smoking these hilariously huge joints and just being totally unnecessary. But if any of you, like me, have hung out with hardcore stoners, you know that unnecessary is the name of the game. I would like to add what weed has done to benefit me. I don't think it's good to use any substance every moment of every single day, but when you do use it, it can enhance the basic pleasures of life. I like to get stoned right before enjoying a sensory experience, like right before a really dank dinner, or before listening to an album, or before a concert or a light show. It's also been a great gift to my creativity, helping me to unleash the contents of my unconscious mind. The reason I love the term jazz cigarette for weed is because of the connotation of it being associated with music and improvisation specifically, and I've experienced how weed can benefit that. It helps with creating music on the fly for multiple reasons. The first reason, I think, is because of the altered mindset. It's like you get to look at your instrument from a new angle, and you're not as subject to your old habits and muscle memory. The other thing that I think helps with improvisation is the fact that you're just more relaxed. And I feel that creativity, and especially music, comes to you a lot better if you are nice and relaxed. And for us psychonauts, weed can be a good way to get back into the headspace of a trip after our trips. I notice it kind of fades with time, but to a certain extent after psychedelics, weed is never the same. It's kind of like a gateway back into the trippy realms. I did a whole video talking about if weed was psychedelic, so I'm going to put that in the description. Another thing that weed enhances for me is meditation. In Kundalini meditation, like the ones that I do, you visualize the chakras inside, and weed can really help with this visualization. And every once in a while, it will turn into a full-blown visionary experience. That brings us to the next segment of the video, where we're going to be talking about the sacral chakra. It's the second chakra, about 1.5 inches or so below your belly button, and it's related to your emotions, your creativity, and sex. The color associated with this chakra is orange. And in the previous video, I was talking about this idea of chakras as circuits of our levels of evolution that's kind of just nested within the next level of our evolution. The way I see the sacral chakra is like the mammalian level of our existence, the part of us that's a mammal. So think of all the things that make us mammal, being warm-blooded and what it feels like to cuddle and nurture and be nurtured and feel that good feeling within groups, and the fact that we have an extremely prolonged childhood, so we take a really long time to grow, and that's all unique to our kind of animal in the kingdom of life. So that's all of the things that I associate with this chakra. It's also associated with an oceanic feeling of consciousness, like when you might be on the dance floor and you feel just like part of the crowd and you're just like this big ocean. I feel like being in a concert is a really good description of this oceanic consciousness. You feel like you belong to a whole, or like you're in some kind of womb, and you feel all the nice protected feelings that come with that. I actually have a recording that I did on guitar that I feel like represents the oceanic feeling of inhabiting this chakra. So I'm going to play that for you. The thing about chakras is seeking balance. You can have a chakra that's either underactive or blocked, or it can be overactive, so you want to find a balance of that. With an overactive sacral chakra, you might be subject to being consumed by your emotions, high highs and low lows, or an unhealthy obsession with sex. If this chakra is blocked, you feel pretty much the opposite. You feel a lack of creativity, a lack of libido, and detached from your emotions. So today we're going to do a few different forms of self-care that relate to this chakra. So what I always like to do are sound meditations, yoga, and since this is an emotional center, verbal affirmations can be really good for this one. And it's important that you feel grounded in your root before we move up to the higher ones. So if you haven't seen that video, I recommend going back to that, at least kind of meditating on your root chakra first. I think one of the best ways to balance the sacral chakra is to be a good mammal. If you have pets or really close loved ones, cuddle them and play with them and connect to your inner child. I feel like that's the part of us that's a mammal. If you're around children, reconnect to your inner child and let yourself remember what that feeling was. Find what works for you. I'm just telling you what works for me. For sound meditation, I usually go for this guy, Temple Sounds. He does meditations where he also does like a verbal guided meditation, and he's playing the Tibetan singing bowls, and he has different sets of bowls for each chakra, and they're all representing different frequencies. And he has a lot of really good affirmations during the meditations too, so I would highly recommend him, and I'll put a link in the description. So I'll be doing all of those today with y'all, and let's see how we feel. In our string of hippie holidays, we've celebrated Bicycle Day, 420, tomorrow's Earth Day, and I always notice this string of days because I'm a psychedelically inclined person and my birthday fills the gap. Today, April 21st, I turned 29 years old, but that's not important enough for it to be its own holiday, so I decided to dedicate this day to music. Specifically, I want to focus on music as an agent of healing and focus on the role of music during psychedelic experiences and how they can induce synesthesia and how interesting all of that is. I think it's a very interesting area of being human, and I like to think about the effect that it has on our creativity. In addition to music, we're going to be talking about the solar plexus chakra. Music works at the deepest level of our soul, and it's a profound manifestation of our humanity. Carl Sagan and Andrew Yang knew this when they sent the golden record out into space. They put the sounds and the music of Earth, different songs and different people saying hello, and they sent that on the spacecraft to go send it way out there and have it discovered by some civilization way down the line. That just shows you that that's such a good way to represent kind of the best of what we are as humans. I'm a musician, so I can attest to the power of music and how much it's changed my life for the better. I'm going to read you a bunch of quotes that I found by writers, authors, and poets about music, and I think they put into words in a way that really few people can. Music is at once the most wonderful, the most alive of all the arts. It's the most abstract, the most perfect, the most pure, and the most sensual. I listen with my body, and it's my body that aches in response to the passion and pathos embodied in this music. Susan Sontag. God has given us music so that above all, it can lead us upwards. Music unites all qualities. It can exalt us, divert us, cheer us, or break the hardest of hearts with the softest of its melancholy tones. But its principal task is to lead our thoughts to higher things, to elevate, even to make us tremble. The musical art often speaks and sounds more penetrating than the words of poetry. It takes hold of the most hidden crevices of the heart. Song elevates our being and leads us to the good and the true. If, however, music serves only as a diversion or a kind of vain ostentation, it is sinful and harmful. Nietzsche. Music expresses that which cannot be put into words and that which cannot remain silent. Victor Hugo. After silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. Aldous Huxley. My music is the spiritual expression of what I am, my faith, my knowledge, my being. When you begin to see the possibilities of music, you desire to do something really good for people, to help humanity free itself from its hang-ups. John Coltrane. Another one from John Coltrane. Overall, I think the main thing a musician would like to do is give a picture to the listener of the many wonderful things that he knows and senses in the universe. I love that quote. Music has been a huge catalyst for my entire psychedelic journey, my psychedelic career, you could say. I remember the first time that I smoked weed, I was super hesitant, but I had this friend who was a little bit older and he was a really good musician, and I remember him very vividly saying, yeah, music and weed, they go together like this. And then I had never put those two together, but I soon gave in and tried it, and then we listened to some music and it just like blasted my mind into a new dimension. I was able to listen to music with such a depth the first time I got high that it felt like the difference between seeing something in 2D versus 3D. It felt like I was gaining that much awareness of hearing music. A few months later, I had my first mystical experience while on LSD and listening to Tame Impala. The music is what catalyzed my Kundalini awakening experience. Later during that same trip, I went to our space where we have our band practice, and I had a jam session with my friends, and I was having all these revelations about our primal nature and the use of feedback on guitar amps. And Jimi Hendrix, and I felt like I understood what it was like to be Jimi Hendrix. It was an insanely ecstatic experience. After the LSD experience, I would often close my eyes when I'm jamming on guitar and playing with my band, and I started to experience these insane levels of synesthesia where I was seeing, just getting high, not even tripping. I would just be seeing these insanely like complex geometries and visuals that you would get from a psychedelic, but I was just seeing them, but very vividly just from weed. And I felt like the visuals were in a way informing the music. Like it felt like I was translating whatever that was into the sound. But then because I was translating into sound, the visuals would also react to the sound that I was doing. So it was like this give and take relationship of affecting these visuals and the visuals inspiring me back and forth. Something to these visuals and the music made me feel like I was seeing some kind of divine truth, some kind of secret to the universe. I like to think of it as the divine mystery. I felt like I was an interpreter for these higher dimensional things, and I was just bringing them down in little slices in the 3D world. That was why I named my band's first album Tesseract, because it was the idea of bringing this four-dimensional object into this reality. And I was also listening to a lot of Terence McKenna, and he always talked about this transcendental object at the end of time. And at that time 2012 was coming up, so it just was all kind of culminating in this mix of experiences and ideas. Synesthesia is incredible and fascinating, and some people don't even need psychedelics or cannabis to achieve this. Some people are born naturally with very intense synesthesia, where they'll make associations that don't make sense to people who are not synesthetic. They'll say the word Monday is the color green, or something like that, where it's just a mix of your senses that just doesn't really follow any logic, but to them they're just kind of associations. They'll hear music and they'll see all these colors and shapes. I don't know if it's the exact same as psychedelic visuals, but probably some kind of the same mechanism is going on. I think I have a mild form of this, and it definitely comes out a lot more whenever I'm on psychedelics or really high. Certain sounds have definitely a color and a texture to me. Like some sounds I hear and it's like clearly blue or orange. It doesn't always happen, but it's pretty mild, like I said. I wanted to dedicate today to music and synesthesia. In the earlier videos this week, we focused on the root chakra and the sacral chakra. So today we're going to be focusing on the third chakra, the solar plexus. It definitely has the coolest name. And when you're meditating on this chakra, you concentrate on the area about an inch above your belly button in the center of your abdomen. This chakra is the center of your individual willpower, and it's what makes you feel that sense of being an atomic individual. In a sense, it's your ego, and not in the unhealthy, toxic ego sense. Like Terence McKenna used to say, if you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't know whose mouth to feed. You could say that most of modern society is rooted in this third chakra. It's very hyper-individualist, egocentric culture, and that is a result of what you would call an overactive third chakra. When it's overactive, you get all the trappings of the ego, the self-centeredness, you are unable to consider others. When it's blocked, you feel like you're totally unmotivated, or you're not in control of your life, or you feel like you're being inauthentic to yourself. The solar plexus connection to hunger runs deep. Think about what a powerful motivator hunger is. There are few things that can get you to get up. When you're extremely exhausted, if you're hungry enough, you will get up and go get food. In the early days, hunger was a matter of survival. The stakes were extremely high, and we had to go and get our food. It was a matter of life and death. Food back then was not guaranteed all the time, so we had to do what was necessary to survive and eat. You often hear about people saying that they have a feeling in their gut. This can either be for a good thing or a bad thing, but this is a perfect example of how chakras represent different aspects of our consciousness. Sometimes you can physically feel a sensation in your gut or in your heart. This chakra is associated with fire and transformation, and I can verify this myself. Sometimes I don't take the symbols too literally, but in this case, it was pretty literally a fire inside of me. When I was having my Kundalini awakening experience, the solar plexus is where it all began. It felt like a literal fire building up inside of me in this third chakra area until it grew so much that it felt like it could only go up, and it moved into the higher chakras. During this experience, I felt a type of synesthesia that was connected to hunger. It felt like my will to eat and to survive, this very primal motivating force, was also the same as my motivation to create and make art and make music. And it was a weird kind of crossing that you don't typically think of these primal urges as this kind of higher purpose, but they were really blending during this experience. And I remember that being very vivid and interesting. When it comes to Kundalini and actively using your willpower to try and do things with your Kundalini energy, the third chakra is the place to do it, which makes sense because it's the center of willpower. So if you're going to exert your willpower on the forces of Kundalini, that's the area you want to do it. And one of the ways that they do this in Kundalini practice is this breath exercise called breath of fire. It's where you rapidly breathe in and out with your diaphragm, like, and you just keep doing it for like 2 minutes, and then it feels like you're clearing out your entire energy. Like it just feels like you're resetting, just the same way you're probably replenishing your blood flow with oxygen. It feels like that energetically. I was skeptical of doing stuff like that, like the breath of fire at first, but then whenever I tried it, I noticed its benefits pretty immediately. And whenever I have like really trippy visions and stuff, whenever I'm meditating, a lot of it starts whenever I do this breath of fire. So there's definitely something to it. I don't know how it's working, but it does work. A way that you can balance this chakra if it feels unbalanced is that you can set a goal and commit to it and carry it out. There's something super empowering about setting yourself a goal and then doing it. Like the fact that I'm doing this psychedelic week thing right now, like this is an idea I had and I had to will it into existence, and it's gonna feel very rewarding and kind of empower me and make me feel more confident that I'm setting goals and and doing them. And it can become a self-sustaining cycle because you make the plan, you do the thing, and then you feel confident because you did the thing, and that builds your confidence to where you can do another thing, and then you carry that out, and it's just this self-fulfilling, self-sustaining thing where it's just reinforcing the good side of it. So start small, just do a little goal, like I'm gonna clean my room today. Sometimes in this chakra, I can actually feel a physical sensation when it's out of balance. It feels like this little black hole is in my solar plexus area. And one of the things that I do to fix it is sound meditations and the breath of fire, like I was saying. I'm gonna add a link to the temple sounds video. I really love his meditations because he plays these Tibetan singing bowls that are meant to target the frequency of that particular chakra, but he also does a really good guided meditation where he kind of says words and affirmations that really help to emphasize this aspect of consciousness related to the third chakra. And to me, that's what all this stuff is about. It's the different levels of your being. So I'm gonna add a link to that video in the description. There are also yoga poses and stretches that cater to this chakra. I've tried a few of them, and I'm gonna be doing some stretches like that today. If I find a good one, I'll add the link in the description. I'm going to be doing those today and doing this with y'all. Another way to open up this chakra is to get some sunlight. Go out in the sun, especially if you're barefoot, and just kind of close your eyes, let the sun hit you, and meditate on the sun, and then also meditate on this spot inside of you in your third chakra area, and see it as its own kind of sun that's being illuminated, and it's resonating with the actual sun. And just allow yourself to feel like you're empowered and like you can get the things done that you really want to get done. And exercise is also great. I like to play basketball. It would be cool if they were self-dribbling DMT basketballs. So that's it for today's video. This has been day 3 of Psychedelic Week. It's going on the playlist called Psychedelic Week, so you can check out the older videos if you haven't seen them, and then the next few videos coming out. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Happy Earth Day, everyone. We don't often reflect on just how lucky we are to have this gorgeous planet. As far as we can tell, our solar system is unique in the universe. And as far as we can see, we're the only life to inhabit the universe. I think that there's more out there, but as far as we can tell now, this is it. Earth Day is connected to the Green Movement that started in 1970 in an effort to preserve the only planet that we have. I believe that humans' true nature is to be stewards of the Earth, to be the planetary gardeners of Spaceship Earth. So today we're going to be talking about the history of Earth Day and how it's celebrated now. And later in the video, we're going to be talking about the heart chakra and various forms of self-care related to that chakra. The roots of Earth Day actually begin at the moon. The Apollo 8 astronauts in 1968 were the first humans to fly to the moon. This isn't the mission where they landed, but it is the first time that they flew around the moon and back to Earth. And when they got there, they came around the moon as they were orbiting the moon, and then they were the first people to witness seeing the entire Earth in one frame, essentially. And they saw the Earth rising above the horizon, similar to how the sun rises above our horizon. And they were thoughtful enough to take a photo, and this is now a very legendary photo called Earthrise. They were extremely affected by the sight of our Earth like this, especially during 1968 when there was so much strife and conflict and things going really badly back on Earth. To see our home planet as this lonely and fragile, gorgeous marble in the vastness of space really had an effect on them. And there is something about not just seeing the beauty of the Earth, but seeing it relative to the infinite expanse of black and void. And just seeing that we have this beautiful marble right here in the middle of a desert.
The Earth was the only thing in the entire universe. Of all this inky black void, the Earth was there with a beautiful blue hue to it. The blue marble, that's what it looked like, a blue marble, a blue agate.
We take it for granted now that we know what the Earth looks like, but until this point in 1968, human beings had never seen the Earth in its entirety this way because nobody had been far enough away to take a picture. The astronaut said, "We came to explore the moon and what we discovered was the Earth." Jim Lovell was the commander of the mission, and he said, "The vast loneliness is awe-inspiring, and it makes you realize just what you have back there on Earth." So these astronauts, especially in the 60s, were not known for being super emotional and poetic people. They were fighter pilots and test pilots, some of the most kind of cool-headed people that you can find. And even to these kind of people, they were extremely affected and realized the profound nature of our existence in this lonely speck in the vast cosmos.
What they should have sent was poets, because I don't think we captured in its entirety the grandeur of what we had seen.
And I think that just shows you how powerful this must be, this experience of seeing the Earth like this. I actually met Jim Lovell one time whenever I was a tour guide at NASA, and he was a really nice guy. He's also the guy that was the pilot during Apollo 13, the mission that almost went really badly, where they said, "Houston, we have a problem." Yeah, that's the guy. And he was also the one during this Apollo 8 mission where they took the first photo of the Earth. When people first saw this photo of the Earth, the perspective shift jolted them awake. It lit a fire under people, and now people really cared about the environment. There were already movements kind of building up, but this was kind of just the ultimate catalyst to kind of fuel the fire. The first Earth Day was celebrated April 22nd, 1970. 52 years ago today. On that day, 20 million Americans protested, demanding that the government take action in protecting the environment, which at that time was about 10% of the population, which is a huge protest. And you got to consider at this time, there is very little regard about what kind of effect our pollution was having, not only on the planet, but on human health. How we have unleaded gas, there used to be lead in gas. It's like people just did things without thinking about the consequences, and we're paying for that still today. But this protest actually had the effect that they wanted, and many new laws were passed. The Environmental Protection Agency was formed, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act.
As Earth Day approached, support for it spread. On April 22nd, 1 in every 10 Americans took part in rallies, concerts, educational programs, and cleanup projects.
It was to raise a set of issues, to tie them all together into one fabric, so that the people who were fighting against pesticides and the people who were fighting to stop freeways cutting through their neighborhoods, or fighting against air pollution, or fighting to preserve a wetland, would realize that they had common values.
The public outcry on that first Earth Day led to political action. Congress passed new laws for clean air, water, and endangered species, and created the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
And surprisingly, it was all done by President Nixon, but I think that was just a particular circumstance at the time. The psychonaut's worst enemy, President Nixon, the person who started the drug war and banned psychedelics, happens to be the person that kicked off the environmental movement. Or he didn't kick it off, but he responded to it in a way that was actually appropriate. Nowadays, Earth Day is the largest observed secular holiday, with 1 billion people recognizing it every year. This is all to keep pushing for these changes to stop polluting the environment and to mitigate the worst effects of climate change, since the greenhouse gases we're putting into the atmosphere are warming the planet. And this can lead to a cascading effect that we don't want to see. There's so many problems dealing with pollution, microplastics, global warming, climate disasters. There's so much to tackle. I have experienced the effects of climate change personally, so this issue has always been very close to my heart. Back in 2008, a hurricane came through in Houston that destroyed my home, and I was homeless for like 6 weeks. And then in 2017, Hurricane Harvey came, and it just parked over Houston and just dumped rain on us for 5 days straight, and it broke the record for rainfall in the United States. It was something like 50 inches of rain. When Hurricane Harvey hit, I was stranded where I was staying at the time, expecting the storm to pass in 1 or 2 days, and I was stuck there for almost a week. And luckily I had food and water, but some people were not so lucky. I remember driving back home after the water had subsided a little bit, and it was just like a scene from the apocalypse. Just total carnage. I remember seeing boats of people lined up. There's a group of people from Louisiana called the Cajun Navy. It's a bunch of like good-willed rednecks that have trucks and boats, and they all kind of teamed up to help in rescue operations for the people who got stuck when the floods happened. So I was driving home and I saw this long caravan of all these trucks and boats, and that was the Cajun Navy. And then there are a lot of chemical plants and things like that in Houston, and whenever you have to shut those down due to like storms and floods, they kick into overdrive. So they have those towers that shoot flames out, and so I was seeing these huge flames billowing out, and it just caused a bunch of smoke in the sky, and it was just a very, very apocalyptic scene, seeing this team of rescuers lined up to go save people, and then these fire billowing in the sky. So I just have such a vivid memory of that, and the fact that Hurricane Harvey was so powerful is due to the fact that the air and the ocean are warming up, and that's what's giving more energy to these hurricanes. So Hurricane Harvey could just be a harbinger of things to come. So let's do our part to take care of the earth. I understand that a lot of this is being caused by large companies and the polluters, but I also think that the more sustainable practices that we adopt, the more normalized it will become, and that will just kind of help to shift the narrative and create a new normal. Because I know it can feel like there's nothing you can do on an individual level that will have a significant effect. And in a sense that's true, but I think we can kind of push the needle a little bit. So today we're also going to be talking about the heart chakra. When you're meditating on the heart chakra, you focus right here in the center of your chest where your heart is, but not to the left where your physical heart is, just right here in the center. And the color associated with it is green. It has to do with your loving and feeling nature, of course. It has to do with joy, compassion, and connection to nature and everyone else around you. You feel a physical sensation whenever you're in love or experiencing heartbreak. You feel that physical sensation right there. So I think that's a good example of whenever you can feel these psychic events in a physical spot in your body. And I think this has something to do with the chakras. Ideally, when our heart is open, we can direct this love, firstly, back to ourselves. I know that's hard to do sometimes, but we gotta try. So the first 3 chakras in Timothy Leary's idea of the chakras, he calls them circuits of biology. The first 3 are the ones that are supposedly earthbound. They have to do with the physical plane. The heart chakra is the place where the physical and the transcendental or ethereal planes meet and interact. It's like the border town between the earth and the transcendental universe. It's here where the Kundalini energy arises from your solar plexus chakra, and it is purified and intensified and supercharged with love. I actually felt this during my Kundalini awakening experience. The fire was billowing up inside of my solar plexus, and I felt like it had nowhere else to go, so it rose up to my heart. And I felt like in the heart is where it was being supercharged. And then it kept going and going and going, but I feel like when it hit the heart is whenever things really started to take off into a cosmic level. I've also had visions on psychedelics and during meditations where I see these neon green lights and symbols and things. And I've posted these stories on videos on my YouTube channel, and I've heard some people comment that this green that I'm seeing has to do with the heart chakra. So that'd be very interesting if particular visions that you see have colors that are telling you something about the chakras. I don't have any more detail, it's all just kind of speculation, but an interesting speculation. When I want to balance my heart chakra, I always go to sound meditation. And there's this really good guy called Temple Sounds, and he does these Tibetan singing bowls, and he not only plays the bowls and helps you meditate on that chakra center, but he also says things in the guided meditation that relate to the heart aspects of consciousness. And I think that's really what the chakras are all about. There's this one thing that he said in the video where during the meditation he's saying, bring love to the mind and intelligence to the heart, and create a connection there. And I think that's a really, really powerful idea. And I really love his videos, so I'm gonna link that in the description for you guys to do it. I did it today, so let's do that together, and I think you'll feel pretty good. Overall, I think the themes for today go together really well. We have Earth Day and taking care for the planet, and the heart chakra, which involves compassion and taking care of each other and creating a more harmonious world overall. That's gonna be it for this video, so I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace. Psychedelics do not come without risk, and I think that that's something the psychedelic community has struggled to talk about. I think it's because the results can be so positive for a lot of us that we want to spread the word without discouraging anybody, similar to what Tim Leary kind of did in the 60s. It's the 5th day of Psychedelic Week, and I want to dedicate today to harm reduction, safety, psychedelic therapy, trip sitting, and we'll also be focusing on the throat chakra later. In the early days of psychedelic research in the 50s, they had actually made a lot of progress in honing in on creating the best possible outcome for a psychedelic trip. They learned that set and setting were the ultimate keys to your success. Set includes the intentions that you set and just kind of your emotional stability at the time. Setting means the environment that you trip in. So you need to know you're in a safe and supportive place, and that there's at least someone who knows you're going to be tripping, or someone with you who will be there just in case things go really wrong. These kind of people being there can help prevent your fearfulness turning into outright panic. Here's an interesting clip of how the early psychedelic researchers thought about set and setting for their patients.
When the person was accepted to go through the program, he was given an outline to write his history, what problems he had, if he had any health problems, what was the relationship with his parents, what was his childhood like. So then they came to the session, and some introductory remarks were made. The importance, for example, of just releasing to the experience and knowing that they had help and could ask questions. And then they were administered LSD. And then we would lie them down on the couch. We'd put headphones on them and encourage an internal journey. And then we would put on music. And we would keep playing the music. And usually it's been the first 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours there. And that's what we wanted, for them to go deeply into themselves and explore. Of course, we were taking notes, and we had a tape recorder so that everything that was said was recorded.
Can I come up for a minute?
Certainly, David.
So then after 4, maybe 5 hours, they would feel like coming out and sitting up, so we began to talk.
That was magnificent.
And they would go to the group say once a week, and they'd share experiences with each other.
Wow.
My feeling was in this that if you're sort of looking for paradise after this experience, you begin to realize that it's right here. Wherever you happen to be, like where we're sitting.
You make your own heaven and hell.
I don't think that a medical or therapeutic setting is always necessary, but I do think it's always necessary to take every precaution you can and think about all possible contingencies. And this is all from a Western, American and European perspective, while the indigenous people of South and Central America have been practicing set and setting through the use of rituals. Here's Ralph Metzner, Ram Dass, and Albert Hoffman talking about their thoughts of set and setting and the ideal place to have a psychedelic experience.
When you look at the peyote experience, it's a church, it's a religion, it's also healing. It helps them with actual medicine, and for example, in treatment of alcoholism. It's also psychotherapeutic. It's an integrated experience.
I suspect the best thing we can do would be to ritualize things.
We should have a kind of meditation centers where there would be the right conditions, the right dosages, all these factors which must be known are fulfilled.
I always recommend, if you're tripping solo, to have somebody either in another room or someone who is going to be waiting or expecting a phone call from you, knowing that you're going to be tripping. The positive presence of a friend like that can totally keep a trip from derailing, and it can actually push it in the total opposite direction. I have experience with this where during my first ego death, I was really kind of starting to freak out because I didn't know what was coming. And my friend was there and had a little bit of experience. I think that also helps a lot if your sitter has experience. And he knew that I was going through some shit, basically. So he held my hand and was there for me like a brother or someone, a dear friend, like you're on your deathbed. And it was my ego's deathbed, but it was feeling like I was dying. And the fact that he did that and showed me the presence and compassion, I feel like that is what actually turned my trip completely into a positive one. That was just my most life-changing experience ever. So I kind of owe it going that well to him. If you're someone prone to a mental illness, things can get really bad for you in a psychedelic setting. Psychedelics can catalyze a mental break if they mesh with the wrong person at the wrong time. All psychonauts have at least one friend who you could say got a little bit lost in the deep end and never came back from their psychedelic trips. And it's really sad. If there's anything we can do to prevent these kind of acid casualties from happening, we should take all the steps necessary to prevent that from ever happening. So I'm actually gonna have a guest doing a little segment for today's Psychedelic Day, and it's gonna be my friend Farm Boy Slim. He's got some friendly pointers for harm reduction and safety for all you trippers.
We can't always be honest with ourselves, and we're all going to make mistakes. But what is important is that we grow from those mistakes and become better for them. So too with psychedelics. On your journey, you're going to make mistakes. It's easy to abuse something that makes you feel so alive and happy. But it's important to remember that abuse is not dependent on how much you use a psychedelic. It's not like alcohol or heroin. For many people, once in their entire life is the healthy dose. For others, once a week. But neither is incorrect if you're truly being honest with yourself. Each of us needs to find in our life what works for us. So when I say that psychedelic abuse can lead to serious psychological harm, I'm not talking about how often you take them. I'm talking about how you use them. Before I use psychedelics, I always think and weigh my options between taking them and not. Do I really need to? Do I feel I need to? Am I taking them for the right reasons? Am I rushing into it? Remember, you can always take more, even if you haven't taken any. But you can never take less. Be safe, my friends.
Sweet. Thank you, Farm Boy Slim. I love this guy's content. I discovered him on TikTok, and he actually just started getting his YouTube channel active, so I'm gonna link you guys his YouTube channel. Go follow him. He does really great harm reduction based content, and as you can tell, wears the giant mushroom costume, which is awesome. So check him out and support him as well. I want to talk a little bit about the abuse of psychedelics. So it's pretty well known that psychedelics are not physically addictive in the same way that opiates are or alcohol. But the thing is, people have such amazing experiences that they often want to relive them. So they'll take psychedelics a little more often than they should. And also keep in mind that tolerance goes up really fast with psychedelics. I think that if you're super intentional, you could trip lightly twice a week for a little while, but that shouldn't last forever. Personally, I use psychedelics every 3 to 6 months. And actually, within this last year, I've only tripped once. It's actually about to be 1 year for me since my last mushroom trip. But I think that's okay because I've spent a lot of time actually trying to integrate a lot of the material that came up during my psychedelic experiences so that when I do go back to the mushroom or LSD or whatever it is, I don't get smacked in the face for not having integrated what I learned in my previous experiences. Hopefully I can keep going deeper into this realm. It's also super important to test your substances, especially when you're dealing with any kind of powdered substance. You really want to test, and acid too. There are tons of test kits available if you just Google for what you're looking for. Please be super careful out there, y'all. Fentanyl is killing people right now, and I have been sold fake acid before that turned out to be 25I N-bomb, which is a psychedelic that is one of the few that actually causes death sometimes. So please be super careful. I know a lot of people probably are being a little bit careless, but we need to do better collectively. I want to talk a little bit about trip sitting. Once you become a little bit experienced, you might want to be a trip sitter for your friends. I was a trip sitter for 3 of my friends during one of their experiences a while back, so I got really prepared. I read a book called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, specifically the section about being a good trip sitter. It's from people who are very experienced in this area, so I wrote an outline of notes before I went to go trip sit for my friends. Trip sitting really deserves its own entire video, so I'm gonna just kind of give you an outline of the notes that I took from this book. I wrote, have everyone either say or write questions or goals for what they would like to engage in the experience, and let them refer to it during the trip, or if they want to just let whatever arises happen. As a guide, remember to have compassion, intuition, and loving kindness. Suggestions at the right moment may help the voyager make a pivotal discovery or retain insight. If an experience is troubling, reassure them that it's normal and it will pass. Stay centered and tranquil. Be willing to realign your support with their shifting experiences. If their sense of reality is being stretched, say, yes, that's good. Would you like to know more? In a gentle suggestion. You can alleviate fear of dissolving self by explaining it to them as a possibility in the preparation phase. If they become fearful, clarify that it's normal and it will pass. Reassurance, gentle touch, and suggesting deep breathing. And make sure that this person's okay with you touching them beforehand, please. Allow them to collect experience and not think about them so much as they occur. Discuss later. It's important that they accept everything in the trip as gifts, even if it appears as darkness or suffering. If they feel uncomfortable with the music, wait a few minutes before changing just to make sure they aren't clinging to control. Judge by the situation. Know that you're creating a sacred space together. After the come up should be about letting go of all that doesn't serve your journey. If they feel they're dying, remind them that their body is fine and this is happening in their mind, and that the guide is here to take them through it. Take notes if asked to. So yeah, tons of really good advice in there. Psychedelic therapy can be one of the most effective ways to heal from your trauma, PTSD, just issues that you're trying to work on. Research into psychedelic therapy and psychedelics in general began in the 1950s, and stuff was actually really progressing until it was banned in the late 60s. Research was completely halted until very recently. A few small studies involving psilocybin and DMT happened in the early 2000s, and now we're on the cusp of a psychedelic renaissance that is using the medical and therapeutic side of psychedelics as a way to legitimize them in the eyes of people who might be skeptical. This is actually the strategy first proposed by MAPS, and I would say it's a pretty good one, but I don't think we should make this our only model of the use of psychedelics. There are tons of studies going on, and Johns Hopkins actually just opened this big fancy psychedelic research center, so it's really a new era right now. It's an exciting time to see what's going to happen with the future of psychedelics. For now, there's still a Schedule 1 substance in the United States. The reason I think that the medical side is a good way to convince people is because if you think about someone who might be really against drugs, like a super hyper conservative American type of person, and if you frame it to them in the sense of like, we can give this MDMA to a veteran who has trauma after coming home from the war, and this is the only thing that is working to help our veterans. I feel like things like that, you can frame it in that way, which is true. It's not a lie, it's not a deception. This is a really beneficial thing. So I think that's why it can be great for convincing people to get on board. MAPS formed in 1986, and they've been the ones behind a lot of this research into the effectiveness of psychedelics helping with depression and trauma and PTSD. It can be effective therapy for so many different ways, but one of the main ways is just the power of the mystical experience to reset a depressed brain. It allows you to connect to something larger than yourself, to something even divine. The other thing it can do is help you to look at your problems and your trauma. Whenever you're in the glow and the euphoria of a psychedelic experience, you can look at these things from a perspective of feeling really good and feeling not scared and feeling whole and complete within yourself during a trip. Especially during MDMA, you're just feeling this very accepting feeling, and you can look at your problems and traumas without any fear attached. And that fear is often the thing that's blocking us from really unpacking these issues that we have. MDMA is really good at that. I actually made a video about my own kind of DIY MDMA therapy at home, and I'll link that in the description. So today we're also going to look at the throat chakra. The throat chakra is the center of creativity and expression. It's a center for communication and being able to speak your personal truth. When it's blocked, for me, I feel like I just can't say what I really want to say, and I can't speak in an authentic way, or that I can't express myself in general. The color associated with this chakra is blue. We've been talking about the chakras as these biological circuits, this idea that comes from Timothy Leary. In their eyes, the throat chakra is the first post-terrestrial chakra. So the idea is that your root, sacral, solar plexus, and heart chakra deal with matters on the earthly plane of existence. Tim Leary's wild idea is that these higher chakras are higher circuits that become activated by psychedelics. He suggests that these are a preview for what's to come in our evolution. Whenever we become spacefaring civilizations in the future, these are the chakras that we'll be operating in. Super cool sci-fi idea. One time I smoked a joint and I had a vision of the Beatles, and I saw the different singers of the Beatles when their songs played, and I noticed also that it showed me which chakra these songs were based in, like which area of the chakras it was emanating from. When I saw Paul McCartney, I saw the energy going through his throat chakra. I could see the elements churning inside of his body, and it was like he was expressing this magical material that was inside of him. He was singing and dancing. The best way I can describe what I saw inside of him is alchemical stardust. He was also lifted out of the atmosphere, floating miles above the earth, but he was still connected and rooted to the earth through this energy beam that went all the way down. This vision also lines up interesting with a quote from Carl Jung talking about the throat chakra, so I'm going to read that to you. He said, "Here one rises above the empiric world and lands into a world of concepts. With certainty, we realize our psychic existence as the only reality through experience." Another way to look at the series of chakras would be that it is like climbing from rude matter to a fine or psychic form. It is where Tantra yoga and Western alchemy intersect, the transmutation of crude matter into the subtle form of spirit. So this is like what I was talking about with the lower chakras kind of representing the earthy, earthbound side of things, and then as you go up it becomes more etheric. In the throat chakra, we reach above our contemporary ideas of the world. In a certain sense, we reach out into the etheric plane. It is as if a rocket has propelled us into space, a space where the psychic reality is the only reality. This world will be reached if we succeed to build a symbolic bridge between the most abstract ideas of physics and the most abstract ideas of analytical psychology. This is the last chakra that Jung feels can be assimilated into Western thought. So I just thought that was interesting because it seems to resonate very well with my vision of Paul McCartney and the throat chakra. To balance this chakra, I think sound meditation is a really great way to do it because it deals with sound and vibration. I would also recommend singing, even if you're not good at it, and try your hardest to express yourself truthfully. I know it's hard to hold your thoughts in sometimes, and I'm not saying you should blurt out everything that comes to your mind, but if you feel strongly about something and you feel like it's the truth, you should say it. I'm someone who has strong feelings about certain things, but I also really don't like conflict. So a lot of the time, if I hear something that's kind of messed up, I wouldn't say anything. But I've gotten a lot better about speaking the truth calmly and confidently when I feel the need. I'll link the video to the sound bowl meditation for the throat chakra. I'll put the link in the description for you, and I'll be doing that one today too. Another good way to make sure this chakra is balanced is to try to make sure that you're not holding tension in this area of the body. That can be another good way. So stretch your neck. There's also specific yoga poses that cater to this. Today I want to dedicate to visionary art, an extremely important part of psychedelic culture. And since we're dedicating a day to each chakra, today we're also going to be talking about the third eye chakra, which is fitting because visionary art often emanates from the mind's eye, and psychedelics can crack it wide open. We're living in a time where an entire new wave of artists are making paintings, sculptures, buildings, exhibits, digital pieces, all depicting the ineffable realms of the psychedelic experience. The reason visionary art is so important is because it's one of the most tangible things we can bring back from the psychedelic experience. This is a shamanic function of art. Of all psychedelic visionary artists, Alex Grey is the most well known, and his two books, Art Psalms and The Mission of Art, were very formative to me. I want to start today by reading a post that Alex Grey made on Instagram, which I think sums up this whole thing perfectly. Even if we just briefly glimpse the state of liberation, it frees us from utter despair, because we've seen infinite spiritual beauty as part of our deepest being. Art can help turn on the light in our souls. Tibetan Buddhist teachers have declared that certain blessed icons and artifacts can plant a seed of liberation in the mind stream of the viewer. The goal for spiritual artists is not only to perfect their technical skill, but also to purify their intentions and dedicate the efforts to awakening themselves and their audience with the highest truths expressible for the benefit of everyone. The ideal for the visionary artist is to be a faithful witness to what has been seen by their own third eye in heaven, transcribing the intensely liberating psychedelic mystical experience, because these are the most healing visions and may contain medicine for viewers. By sharing the mystical experience through painting, we can provide an observatory for the beyond within. So that last quote really struck me. We can create an observatory for the beyond within. I felt like Alex Grey was the first time that I had any of my experiences validated. Before I knew what the chakras were and Kundalini, I had had this experience and I was Googling it, trying to figure out what it was. And it wasn't until I saw Alex Grey's paintings depicting these energies that I realized that I might not be crazy. Alex Grey is well aware of that his art can be validating and make people feel like they're not crazy. I'm sure he's been told by hundreds of people that very thing. I want to play a little clip of Alex Grey talking about this. It's a clip from Burning Man in 2012 talking about why visionary art matters. And I'll put the link to that whole thing in the description.
One of the most important experiences that a human being can have is something that is happening inside, and they're having a vision. They're having a mystical experience, an opening to God. they're witnessing it. It's emblazoned on their consciousness. But how to share it? You know, so many people come up to me and say, and I'm sure it's the same with every artist in this town. Oh man, you know, like just seeing your work, it makes me know I'm not crazy because of what I saw when I was in space. And so it is an affirmation to our community of journeyers. And so that in itself is healing. You know, that in itself can relieve someone from a really, they may be holding on to some panic or fear about their experiences and things. But if they see it's an actual realm that multiple people, in fact millions of people have entered, and then it can be expressed so eloquently, so beautifully, and evolving in such a powerful way through the new waves of visionary artists. This is what's really incredible. But the mystic visionary artists distill the multi-dimensional entheogenic journey into externally crystallized theophanies, icons embedded with the evolutionary worldviews. Since mystic visionary artists paint the transcendental realms from observation, their work offers a growing body of evidence, substantiating the divine imaginal realms, and by extension, spirit itself.
Another time that I had a vision validated was by two artists at the same time. Basically, during a mushroom trip, I saw a fabric kind of bulging and sinking, and it was black with white polka dots. And then another time when I was smoking, I saw this molecule spinning around like it was on some kind of 3D rotating computer model, and the head of the molecule was in the shape of a dodecahedron. So fast forward a few years, and then I see this piece come out. It's a lamp in the shape of a dodecahedron, and each side of this dodecahedron is covered in the pattern of the exact same thing I saw in my mushroom trip. I couldn't believe that that was real, and I felt like I had validated something from the deepest part of my being. And luckily I was able to get this lamp, and I now am a proud owner of it, and it feels like I've actually got an artifact from the psychedelic realm, from my visionary experiences, and then brought it back. And now, not only do I have this artifact, but it's like a lamp, and it projects cool patterns on the walls, and it kind of creates a vibe in my room, and I really feel like I'm in my element whenever this thing is on. And I made a video about this experience quite a while back, so I'll put the link to that in the description if you want to hear the whole story. Terence McKenna also had a lot to say about this. He was a huge proponent of the artist being a shaman figure and going into the deep end of the psychedelic realm and bringing something back to the collectivity, and also this idea of the artist helping to paint the future that we want to live in. He has an entire talk dedicated to this one topic called A Message to Artists, and I made a video also reacting to his talk, so I'll put a link to that in the description too. I don't mean to plug myself every 5 seconds, but as you can tell, I'm really steeped in all of this stuff, and I want to provide resources for anyone who's interested to dig deeper into the things that I'm just mentioning here. He also talked about how certain themes of art styles can be present in the psychedelic experience. There's a clip of him talking about him commanding the mushroom to show him Art Deco and abstract cubism or whatever it is, and he was an art historian himself, so he probably had this information in his brain, but he was still appalled that the mushroom could do this, and the mushroom could also show him things completely alien to humans. So I'm going to share a clip of him talking about that.
Other times, you know, it can be very cosmic. It can be steered. And this is a phenomenon that totally puzzles me, that many people have verified, which is you can give it a theme. Like you can say Art Deco, and this stuff will begin flowing toward you. Millions and millions and millions of cigarette lighters, ashtrays, glasses, dresses, all this stuff, all perfectly realized Art Deco, high Art Deco. And then you can just say, you know, no, Hellenic Greece, and it just, and it does that. And then you can say, okay, do one I've never seen, and it can do that. And you say, okay, now make it weird, and it just say, okay, that's weird enough. And what is happening here, you know? I mean, orthodox evolutionary theory, if it can be extended to brain organization, would tell you that you're not supposed to have anything in your head that doesn't have a purpose, a survival purpose, a biological raison d'etre. And yet, vast amounts of imagery and information. And I've said, you know, in 20 minutes you see more art than the human species has produced in 15,000 years. Well, now, if that's true, what in the world is going on that Joe Blow can outdo Michelangelo and everybody else rolled into one, and that it's only 5 grams away? What is human history then anyway, that we've taken all this time to do this thing? Why are our horizons of experience so limited if this is so immediately accessible?
And of course, our discussion of visionary art would not be complete without mentioning the indigenous cultures. They've been doing this stuff for a little while longer than the English-speaking world. 2 things come to mind at first. The first is one of the most famous visionary artists, Pablo Amaringo. He was from South America, and he painted the ayahuasca visions in a way that really resonates with ayahuasca experience. He uses specific motifs and colors and patterns that come up during ayahuasca ceremonies. Another one also connected to ayahuasca is the Shipibo tribe. They have a signature art style that they weave into clothing, and from what I heard, if you go to them, they will actually weave this pattern that resembles an ayahuasca vision. They'll weave that into your clothes for you. Probably my favorite visionary artist doesn't even take psychedelics, at least as far as I know. Lee Miklowski is an artist based in Malibu, California, and he had painted his entire library, covering the floors, covering the spines of the books, covering the bookshelves. He also had regular paintings on canvas as well. That art is some of the most beautiful art I've ever seen in my life. Something about it just resonates so much with me. I feel like there's some kind of truth, some kind of primordial essence or something that it's bringing out, and it's so beautiful that it feels true.
Cosmogramma. We are part of something vast and wondrous.
I feel that he's a true channel to the unconscious and a modern day Blake. I remember I asked him how he painted such masterpieces, and he kind of just shrugged, like it wasn't really him, like he was possessed by the unconscious mind. And in that spontaneous creation, a truth is revealed that bypasses the intellect. I do remember something that he said later, and it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever received as an artist. He said, if you dig the canals, the water will flow. Basically implying that the real art comes from the unconscious mind, and we're only in control of some circumstances. We do get to control the outer circumstances, what we feed our brain. That's the digging of canals. We can read about alchemy and spirituality and listen to beautiful music and get inspired, and we can be the ones making the choice to sit down at the desk and create some art. We can steer the rudder, but we aren't pushing the ship. There are many others, so I encourage you to go out and find visionary artists and support them. Alright, so let's get into the chakra for today. So we're going to be talking about the third eye chakra. It's right here in the center of your forehead between your eyebrows. It represents the aspects of our being related to our deepest intuition, wisdom, mystical visions, being able to see other people's chakras and auras and that of your own, precognition and out-of-body experiences, astral projection. It's where we develop an impersonal mind and detach from our physical and mental illusions. I consider this the first transcendental chakra. I think of the third eye as if it's this enlightened being within us, and it's looking at the entire world above and beyond all of these physical and mental attachments. It's like if we had an inner yogi who's always constantly enlightened and meditating and contemplating, living within us and seeing everything that's occurring. I believe my LSD trip 10 years ago awakened my Kundalini and opened up energy in my chakra centers, which I had never heard of before that experience. It opened all of my chakras, including the third eye. This is what led me to have the ability to sometimes perceive auras, chakras, and sometimes that of other people. I had an experience when I was on 4-HO-MET where I basically saw the auras of my two friends, and they were very unique in their shape and their color, and I felt like it was a great way to represent their personalities. It was beautiful. I also went to see Tame Impala back in 2013, and I swear that I could see his third eye when I saw him in concert. I wasn't that far away, and I swear it looked like he had a little plate, like a little egg-shaped thing sticking out of his third eye. This is not an everyday perception. I'm not going around seeing everyone's auras at all times. Thank God. I don't know if I could handle that, but it does happen sometimes. The visuals that I get when I close my eyes and listening or playing music are incredible. The visuals don't just look nice. They take on an emotional significance. It's really hard to explain unless you see them, but other people talk about this emotional significance these visuals seem to be loaded with. In my vision of the Beatles, I saw each song represented by which chakra it was emanating from. And when the George Harrison song came on, it was super psychedelic and it was emanating from his third eye. I saw him sitting in the grass, crossing his legs, and I saw two purple wings made of neon light right above his third eye, and I could feel the serpentine energy rising up the spine. Sure enough, the color that the Hindus depict this chakra with is a light purple, and the symbol they use to depict it is also a two-petaled lotus. So again, I think that I'm seeing something that these symbols simply map out. It's symbolic, but it's really pointing to something that's there. If this chakra is unbalanced, you might feel a little unrooted, or like you're feeling unimaginative or uninspired, or like you're not tapped into your intuition. One of the best things you can do to open and balance the third eye chakra is just meditating. And when you meditate, relax. Some of the best meditations that I've ever had also include the physical, systematic relaxation of every part in your body. And I notice when I get into a meditation, I'm holding all this tension in my face and my arms and legs and all these random spots in my body. And so when you let go of these muscles, it actually causes a lot more things to happen in your deep meditations, which this shouldn't be the goal, but it's a byproduct of getting really deep into meditation, especially combined with cannabis. Another way is just to make sure that you've done what you can to balance the other chakras, because this is a system that needs equilibrium from all parts. Another good way is doing sound meditation while focusing on this center. I always use the guy Temple Sounds, and I'll put a link in the description for his video on the third eye chakra. There's also yoga poses that cater to this particular spot. So I don't know of too many, but if I find one, I'll add a link in the description. If not, you should go look for one on YouTube. Another great way to do this is to look at some visionary art and let it seep into your imagination. This video is going on a playlist of all the other Psychedelic Week videos. Go check those out if you missed any of them. Also, you know, it'd be a huge support if you haven't liked and subscribed already. That would really help me out. I've had a lot of fun making these Psychedelic Day videos, and we got one more coming up for Cosmic Perspective Day. So I'll see you in the next one. Hey y'all, it's day 7 of Psychedelic Week. We're capping off our celebrations with Cosmic Perspective Day. I think it also pairs extremely well with the fact that we'll be talking about the crown chakra, our connection to the cosmos. So I'm wearing this hat to depict my crown chakra. For most of human history, our species has imagined itself at the center of all the action. The world was the center of the universe, and we're all the main characters of the movie playing out here on planet Earth. People thought the sun and stars revolved around us. Copernicus came around nearly 500 years ago and changed our view of the cosmos, although it took about 100 years for his ideas to be adopted. Then we discovered we live in a galaxy, a giant island of stars, and our solar system is just one grain of sand on its shores. In 1924, Edwin Hubble settled a debate about this blob that they were looking at in the sky. He said that the Andromeda object they had been looking at was actually another galaxy, and that the universe was full of galaxies. Our perception of how vast the universe is multiplied by a staggering amount. Estimates continue to change as the science and technology improves, but there are definitely at least 200 billion galaxies in our universe, each one of them with anywhere from 100,000 to billions of stars. Some of the largest galaxies have 2 trillion stars in just one galaxy. The story of humanity's place in the universe in the last 500 years has put us in our place so much that it's almost hilarious. We went from being the center of the entire universe to being a speck of a speck of a speck. And that's not to completely buy into the idea that we're insignificant. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, when he thinks about the fact that our bodies and the atoms that make us were forged in the crucible of ancient stars, that doesn't make us small, that makes us huge. We are a part of this giant cosmos. And that's a lesson that psychedelics teach us as well, that we are one contiguous whole with this entire cosmos. So we are just as large as it is. We are literally stardust that has become self-aware. What a crazy situation to find ourselves in. We evolved from molecules to simple organisms to animals to apes and to humans, and now we're this kind of special, smart, hairless ape. Our journey goes back billions of years to the birth of the universe, and that's no small feat. As far as we can see, it's not extremely common for life to form and to become intelligent. Nothing helps us appreciate the cosmic perspective more than listening to the words of Carl Sagan. Interesting thing happens to a lot of astronauts who go into space, especially when they see the Earth from space. They call it the overview effect, which is basically like getting slapped in the face with cosmic perspective. It makes them appreciate the Earth and realize how special and fragile it is, and how foolish it is that we humans fight and fight over control over a fraction of a dot.
I had completed my major task for going to the moon and was on the way home. Observing the passing of the heavens as we were rotating. The Earth, the Sun, the Moon, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens. The magnificence of all of this. All matter in our universe is created in star systems. And so the matter in my body and the matter in the spacecraft and the matter in my partner's bodies was the product of stars. We are stardust, and we're all one in that sense. It triggered this experience of saying, wow, those are my stars, my body's connected to those stars. And it was accompanied with a deep ecstatic experience, which continued every time I looked out the window all the way home. And it was
so this wasn't an intellectual insight, but a full body experience.
It was a whole body experience. And when I got home, I wanted to find out what did this mean. I'd never had such an experience. So I started digging through the science literature, and I couldn't find anything. And so then I appealed to some anthropologists over at Rice University near the Space Center. Said, please help me try to understand what was going on here. And so they came back to me a short time later and pointed out to me in the Sanskrit what's called samadhi, which is an experience of seeing things in their separateness, but you experience them as a unity accompanied by ecstasy. And I said, well, yes, that's exactly the type of experience that I had. And thus I continued my research after that, and I came to realize that in virtually every culture of the world, and notably in the Greek culture, there's some similar type of experience, what I call the big picture effect. In other words, you see things in a larger context than you saw them before, and that tends to expand your awareness, and you try to fill in some of the blanks because you're seeing a larger picture than you ever saw before.
I think it's possible to stretch our imaginations to imagine the size of the galaxies and beyond. But one of the things that happened to me during my acid trip that I keep talking about was I felt my consciousness expand to the size of the larger cosmos. I felt one with the universe, and I actually felt the immensity of space. I could feel how we were just the blossoming fruit on the tree of evolution, and the world was continuing to turn just as it has for billions of years. This spacey feeling stayed with me for a while, and it inspired me. Sometimes psychedelics get me back to that cosmic feeling. I feel the vastness and the mystery and wonder of it all. I feel like this psychedelic cosmic consciousness and the cosmic perspective are in line with each other. It reminds me of the name of Joseph Campbell's last book, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space. The inner world is a vast universe of its own. It's a mystery tucked within a mystery. Also, it's so strange how this is how our universe is arranged. Stars, planets, galaxies, black holes. What? But here we are, the current crew of Spaceship Earth. But let's do our part to take care of the planet and each other, in the hopes that we pass it on a little better to the next generation. For the 7th day of Psychedelic Week, we'll be focusing on the crown chakra. This chakra is located on the top of your head, a little towards the back. Some people say this chakra is actually outside of the body, right here above the head. It's kind of like the funnel or the goblet that collects the cosmic energy that does go into us. This is the final chakra, so it's associated with being a connection to the source of creation. Just like how in the first video I was talking about the root chakra is the masculine energy rising up the spine, this is where the feminine energy of potential and creation come down into your crown. The crossing and uniting of these two currents is Kundalini energy. It's associated with the higher self and enlightenment. I believe that you can have an open crown chakra without necessarily being enlightened. The Hindu name for the crown chakra means thousand-petaled lotus. It reminds me of those psychedelic mosques in Iran and depiction of the DMT dome space. I have noticed energy in this particular center. After my Kundalini experience, I was playing guitar one time. I would improvise and create music on the spot. One time when I was high and jamming, I felt this little tingle in my head. My head began to swirl around and around, and kind of my spine with it, like this. It was super subtle and it felt like I wasn't controlling it. Then I realized it felt like the music was being downloaded from above, and that it was coming through this drain on the top of my head and then coming out through my hands and being expressed in the real world. I only really feel aware of this chakra when I'm in the peak of a psychedelic experience or if everything else is feeling balanced. I do a guided Kundalini meditation, and she actually starts not from the root, but she starts from the crown and works her way down. I found that this is actually a really good way to do it if you practice Kundalini. It also makes sense because a lot of us are already living from this mental space in our head. We identify with the driver behind our eyeballs. Our center of consciousness is already in the head. Carl Jung actually suggested that Westerners practice Kundalini from the top down in this way because of this. But I would suggest making sure that you're rooted first, because in my experience, I was blasted into cosmic consciousness, but I didn't have the proper foundation and root to keep me grounded. So I got the cosmic stuff, but it came at a cost. It was only because I integrated my Kundalini practice and stopped tripping so frequently that I could ground myself and pull it together. Meditation and sound meditation are the best way to balance this chakra, but like I said, you want to make sure everything else is feeling balanced. I'll link the sound meditation that I use, and I'll be doing that one with you today. Well guys, that was a blast. If you missed any of the days on Psychedelic Week, I got the playlist full of them here. I really enjoyed sharing all of these ideas and thoughts with you, so I hope you enjoyed it. I'm probably going to take a couple weeks to rest and focus on music, since I basically just did a marathon of 8 videos in a row. I would love to know your thoughts and which theme for Psychedelic Day was your favorite, or any of your thoughts on chakras. I got a comment saying they felt like their solar plexus was blocked. I'd love to hear any thoughts on this that y'all have. Thanks to everyone who watches and supports the channel and comments and likes the videos. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation in the comments or join our Discord server. You never know what wonderful other you may meet. Cheers, fellow travelers, and peace.